So my name is Pat Moore. I do execution consulting and index research at Instinet. I typically will be interacting with traders on the buy side, but I think that recently we've had more and more interest from fund managers regarding what's been happening with the index research. So today I'm going to keep it pretty narrow because we've only got 5 minutes and focus on A shares. So we can go through. The main summaries are MSCI announced that they will increase the adjustment factor from 5% to 20% in May, August, and November of this year. That means that the A share weighting in MSCI Emerging is expected to increase from current 0.8% to 3.3%. Today, I am only going to be talking about passive fund flows. We're seeing big numbers being talked about in the press. Those are generally reflecting MSCI's estimate of active money following their indices. I'm only talking about passive today. Okay, we will see increased weightings in China A, and keep in mind this will coincide with the inclusion of Saudi Arabia and Argentina. So the China A is going to be sharing the spotlight with those moves. The country decreases, and this is one thing that I think people need to be cognizant of. In order to make room for China A, China XA, in other words, the red chips, the P chips, the ADRs are going to get a lower weighting. So the net effect on China is positive. MSCI China in emerging markets is positive, but it's not quite as strong as some people might think. We will conclude the presentation with a list of A shares that we expect to be impacted, and I would also highlight that I'll end the presentation with a chart showing the performance of how hedge funds are playing the MSCI rebalance, and how the last rebalance was very much driven by China. Okay, so very quickly, in May, we're going to see the weight increase from 5 to 10, and you're going to see the China X names coming in. In August, the adjustment factor is going to go from 10 to 15, and then in November, it's going to go from 15 to 20. I would also mention that the decision to go ahead with the increased A share weighting was not a surprise. What was a surprise was that they moved the calendar a bit more aggressive. It was originally planned for, I believe, June of next year, and now it's all going to be completed by November. I think page 7 will be of interest to a lot of fund managers because it's not just an A share discussion, but what happens to the other countries that have to make room for the China A. And I've kind of highlighted 4 or 5 numbers here that I think are interesting. First of all, at the bottom, you see A share going from 0.8 to 3.3% of MSCI emerging market. MSCI China total, so that's going to be A plus red chips plus P plus ADR plus H. That's going from 32.4% to 33%. So that's what I was talking about. The overall MSCI China is not really increasing that much. And then we can see at point number 3 here, we're giving you the fund flows that we are forecasting to go into A shares. So 1.8 billion in May, 1.6 in August, 1.9 in November. Okay, and then typically managers are very interested in the effects on other countries. So what we've given you in the table on the right is the MSCI emerging market countries ranked by estimated fund flow. So Saudi Arabia is going to get 3 billion. A shares are going to get 1.8 billion. And then down at the very bottom, you see current MSCI China, XA, these guys are going to lose 1.8 billion. Now, in the index research world, essentially the way this works is we start with an estimate of AUM, and from that we back out how much shares we expect to be traded. We divide that by 20-day average, and that's how we get like the percentage of a day's volume that we expect to be traded, and that's presented in chart 4. Finally, this is just to kind of show you how hedge funds are extremely active in the index rebalance world at the moment. What this chart is showing on the left is buys versus sells. So we have additions, we have deletions, we have share increases, we have float increases. With that, so what we do with that is take the expected shares traded, create a weighted portfolio of buys and sells. And what this is showing is that over that 2-week period from announcement to effective date, we saw 8% increase. So it's very strong performance. And then the chart on the right, you can see that most of that was driven by China. I've just been given the message that my time is up, so I'm going to wrap up. And I'm also going to say that today was very short. It's just MSCI, but keep in mind we've also got FTSE. Okay, FTSE's going to happen. Their A share is going to happen in June, September, and March. And our expected fund flows in June is 1.5 billion, September 1.5 billion, March of 2020 3 billion. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Patrick. The next speaker I would like to introduce is Ting Lu, who's Nomura's China Chief Economist. Ting Lu's update today, I think, is very timely given the start of the MPC this week. He's also published a report on the China property sector yesterday evening, which I'm sure he'll touch on. Ting Lu is dialing in from Korea, where he's marketing. Can I just check if we have Ting Lu on the line?
Hello, could you hear me?
We can. Go ahead, Ting.
Good. Well, thank you so much. Well, at this moment, I think the update is just about where is China's recovery. For optimistic forecasters, they believe recovery is happening now. For me, I'm a little bit more cautious. I expect recovery to happen maybe a few months later. But we do see some green shoots, but I don't think it's enough because something else is getting worse. So what's the source of the slowdown and why we believe the slowdown could be worse than market had expected? Well, you can take a look at page 3. It's about exports. Well, China's export growth most likely will slow quite a lot from last year's 10% because of the payback of the front loading last year. It's also because of a slowdown of the global economy. This part of the slowdown could slow China's economic growth rate by close to 1%. And next, you can take a look at page 5. You can see property markets. Well, I think this is the most important part of the Chinese economy because property contributes more than 25% of GDP. And new home sales growth slowed for the first time to negative territory in the fourth quarter last year. But in the first 2 months, based on the information we collect from developers, most likely new home sales growth in the first 2 months could be down more than 10%. And so our view that China's property sector is getting to a winter time is confirmed, and most likely the slowdown will continue for a while because of the distortion imposed by China's massive stimulus, which was supported by Chinese central banks' money printing in the past few months in the so-called cash settlement program of the shelter renovation programs. Of course, we have some other parts of the economy also facing big slowdown. As you can take a look at page 12, you can see passenger cars. Passenger car sales growth was deeply negative at minus 19% in the past couple of months. And I also believe that this slowdown will be sustained for another few months. And this is 4% of China's economy. And then next page is China's construction machinery sales growth. Of course, we know that in the first 2 months this year, actually there was a small recovery, but I believe the recovery will be short-lived. Actually, the big trend is that there was quite impressive growth in 2017 at 100%. Last year was around 50%. And this year, most likely, replacement cycle is over. So for the rest of the year, I expect further slowdown, and this will also affect China's growth rate. Although this part of the economy is less important, but the volatility is quite high, so it will have quite a big impact on GDP. Now, so what's next? Well, of course, people put a lot of this focus on policies, and we do this too. But I remind my clients that for those policies, we need to realize that compared with before, the room is much smaller. This is because for passenger cars, cutting tax again may have very small impact. Why? Because the last time the Chinese government did this was in 2016. It's just too close. And this time around, the Chinese government may not be able to devalue renminbi to boost export growth. and perhaps maybe they won't be able to subsidize some of the sectors because of the trade negotiation between the U.S. And for the property sector, pumping more money to low-tier cities will only get things worse, and also because multi-loan doubled, price doubled. So I think the demand in these low-tier cities won't be sustained. But for big cities, perhaps maybe the Chinese government still want to save face because they, a couple of years ago, promised those type of measures as long-term solutions, and they just don't want to change those time trains when situations are not bad enough. But I expect for the next few months, more and more cities will do this kind of easing by themselves, and the central government will allow them to do this. That will be the real turning point. And then finally, for infrastructure, this is the real focus of the stimulus. But again, I believe that the scale cannot be as big as before because the base is very large, and this time around, the Chinese government only want to concentrate this urban transit investment in those big cities. So regarding the scale, I think this time for infrastructure won't be as big as 10 years ago or even 5 years ago because of those limits on this infrastructure spending. And finally, I believe that the room for the Chinese government to pump a lot of money and credit is smaller than before because the RMB is already overvalued, and also because the foreign debt in China has been rising quite a lot, and in the meantime, FX reserve has been down. Current account now is almost in deficit. So most likely, the Chinese government will have to constrain itself regarding policy easing, regarding money printing. And finally, let me say one thing. Although I'm perceived as kind of like a bear and a very, very bearish about the economy, but actually I'm just being cautious. And just because I'm cautious, I expect more policies to be rolled out in the next few months. Especially, I think the key change will be the Chinese government's attitude towards the property sector. Actually, in the MPC, we noticed such a big change because in the MPC's work reports, the Premier Li didn't say anything about continuing speculation. In contrast, he focused on developing big cities. This is exactly our views, but we need this real policy changes from the government, and I believe this will be perhaps in the middle of the year. So that's why my overall view is that slowdown will continue. Policy room is limited on other fronts, and eventually the Chinese government will deregulate property markets in those big cities to, generate a real stabilization and recovery. So I stop here. Thank you.